So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Shelby Steele.
When we won the civil rights movement, and we did win it, when white supremacy was defeated, we moved into freedom for the very first time in our history. And of course, freedom had been the promised land, and we had longed to get there. You go back to the Negro spirituals and black music and folklore, and there's all this talk about the promised land and what it's going to be like when we get there and so forth. And of course, we always equated that promised land with freedom. But freedom is very, 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 very different, fundamentally different than what we normally think of it. It's not a promised land. It isn't anything. It's just freedom. And so when we won freedom, and again, we had survived about 4 centuries of oppression, so we had all the skills in place to survive oppression. We were good at it. I have written in the past about the imagination, the ingenuity of Black American culture in surviving oppression. We had no experience whatsoever with freedom. We'd never had it. We didn't have the values for it. We weren't prepared for it. We didn't have the ideas with which to seize it, to take advantage of it. We didn't even really know that that's what you do, that it's so entirely dependent on individual will and on the assumption of responsibility, and all these sorts of things were not in our experience. And so when we came into freedom, we experienced it as a humiliation. Because it's, oh my, look how inadequate we are. Look how uneducated we are. Look how non-competitive. We don't know. Well, again, all over the world, in all of these colonies that had won their freedom, the same thing happened. They ran into freedom, and whoo, it was not a kiss, it was a smack. And it said, you know, you were a janitor before, and now that you're free, you're still a janitor. You don't know how to become a business executive. You don't have in place the entire apparatus of values, of education, of opportunity to do that. You're free now, and you're still a janitor. That's painful. Freedom became and is experienced by people who newly become free as a shame, as a humiliation, as a painful experience, something that is difficult. And invariably, what happens is that because freedom is associated with such pain and shame, the first thing people do is say, hey, I'm not really free. Racism is everywhere. Oh, maybe it's underground now. Maybe it's institutional now, but boy, in other words, I'm not free. Because in a sense, the group has a fear of freedom. Freedom is shame. Freedom, because if you don't know what to do with it, then, and you're not doing well in it, then again, you experience it as shame. So we began to define our situation with what is called bad faith. Bad faith is when you say, I used to say when I was young and starting as a writer, I can't really get started. I can't write this book because I don't have any time. I have to make a living. I don't have any time. So I would excuse myself from having to develop as a writer. Well, when I finally gave up bad faith, then I didn't get any more time, but I worked a little harder. Bad faith is, in other words, it's excuse making. It's a way you spare yourself, because if I'm free, I can do whatever I want. If I want to write a book, I can write a book. But I deny that I'm free, because if I admit that I am not free, then I'm going to feel ashamed. Well, most of the identity, certainly the black identity that began to emerge right away in 1965, 66, 67, when we hit freedom, is a bad faith identity. An identity that says we're really not free. Boy, racism is everywhere. Now, we had just defeated racism. We had just stepped into much greater freedom. But we were never as obsessed with racism when we were actually segregated as we are today in freedom. Today, we are upset. We worship at the church of racism. Racism is everywhere. It's just so subtle. It's in every little situation. And we're still being victimized by it. And that explains why we haven't done better. And so we are a people traumatized, not by oppression, but by freedom. And the great challenge that faces us as a people, and I have every faith that we will live up to it, is to learn to thrive in freedom. We're free. It doesn't matter that there's still racism in the world. White supremacy no longer has any authority. So what if somebody believes white people are superior? I don't care. I don't care if they can't interrupt my life, and if they can't keep me from becoming educated and taking out loans in banks and pursuing my dreams. What do I care? I'm not going to lose any sleep over someone like that. But if I don't know how to move my life ahead in freedom, and I was often point to the example of my own father, who was born in 1900 and only went to the third grade. And before he went to the fields, he was a wonderful man. I wouldn't be standing here today if it were not for him. But when I started out in the university, I couldn't go to my father and have him tell me how to get tenure. How do you play politics in this? He said, go for it. So I had to figure that out and ask people, and many people were quite willing to be helpful and so forth. But I didn't have that kind of cultural capital in my background, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not hard to get. But if you say that your problem is racism all the time, then you won't be able to deal with the fact that you don't have that kind of cultural capital, and you need to get it. It's not hard. You just need to pay attention to it. So again, I think that freedom was this terrible trauma for us. We began to develop an identity in bad faith, and that out of that trauma, what we decided, or at least what our leaders decided. As leaders are often people who smell opportunity, is they realized that white guilt was there, that whites were in this position of having to dissociate and prove all the time that they weren't racist. And so we developed a black leadership in America that has been since that time devoted to absolutely nothing but the manipulation of white guilt. You do not see this leadership turn around and look at their own people and say, our problem is we don't have enough cultural capital. We've got to put a lot more energy in education, a lot more effort in restoring our families. Family is the most important institution in any society. Family's weak, the society's weak. We've got to really do that regardless of whether white people are guilty or not. I can accept as valid any black leader who turns around and asks most of all from his own people. But one who just simply asks of others, of whites, is the worst possible kind of leader, because then you see what position did that put blacks in? When all you're going to do is manipulate white guilt. You're stuck. Nothing is available to you but protest and anger. You have to make sure that the white man knows you're angry, and you have to make sure that he's intimidated by it, and that he's a little scared of you, Because if he ever feels that you're not angry and that you're not stuck in this protest mode, he won't give you anything. He won't feel the need to dissociate. So for 40 years now, we've had a leadership devoted to nothing more than that. Manipulation of white guilt. And so it is no surprise that in the year 2000, black students did worse on the SAT exam than they did in the year 1990. As far as I was concerned, there was a lot of freedom in the 1990s. Why decline? Why this backward slip? Why does the illegitimacy rate stay stuck at 70%? Black women get married at half the rate of white women and divorced at twice the rate of white women. Marriage is a disappearing institution in our inner cities. Is of course weak all across America in many ways, but is far, far weaker in our inner cities than anywhere else. So how has the manipulation of white guilt helped us? Not at all. It has put us right back. And I think of the civil rights victories as a period in time when we talk about self-sufficiency, self-determination, where we took it on our own. There was no government program that created the civil rights movement. We got out there and got this great, wealthy, powerful society to acknowledge it's wrong. We achieved that through hard work, initiative, self-determination, and so forth. And the minute we achieve it, we turn around, manipulate white guilt, and put ourselves right back in a dependent position on that society. And not only that, we nurture this dependence as a kind of black pride. So the black who is not angry about being and protesting and arguing to be dependent on the larger society, the black who is not doing that is an Uncle Tom. The black who says, I want to be self-sufficient. I want to take my life in my hands and do it, and I believe that we can get a lot farther as a people if we do that. That black is an Uncle Tom. The black who says, oh my God, we cannot make it without the paternalism of whites, without manipulating that stigma, without keeping them on the hook, as we say. That is the militant. That's Mr. Black Power. Well, so we've got it all completely screwed up and backwards. And of course, we punish those in our group who are high achievers, who have used the freedom open to them and achieved great things. Well, we say Condoleezza Rice is not really, she doesn't have the flavor. She's not really black. So we punish her. Why would we punish those among us who do so well? We punish Condoleezza Rice because she proves that we are free and that opportunity is everywhere. She proves it. So we have to put her down because, again, we're in bad faith. We're afraid of freedom. And so we put her down and Colin Powell down, these extraordinarily accomplished individuals. And we say, again, the crack dealer on the corner is a brother. So it is when you get into this, when you make this mistake of relying on the fact that another group of people have lost their moral authority, and you say, that's my chance, that's my opportunity. All I've got to do is just keep working them. Then you don't overcome. You begin to decline. The challenge, I think, for Black Americans is to begin to live in good faith rather than in bad faith. Instead of constantly saying there's racism around every corner and racism is a big barrier in my life, say instead there may be racism, but I'm free. I have opportunities. I can do whatever I want in life. I can go as far as I want to go. And I want to make sure my kids get that message. I want to make sure I'm not going to take my kids. Look what we do to young black kids. Oh, this is how you were oppressed. This is how you were sat upon. And in order to be black, you got to understand racism is everywhere. They're all against you. How's a child going to thrive in that kind of with that kind of a message? We should say the opposite. You're free. Everything's possible. You just have to work hard. You just have to set yourself in motion, take responsibility. And you're going to do very well. So I think blacks have to live in good faith. What do whites have to do? I think that what whites have to do is acknowledge and accept one interesting fact. It's a fact. It's not a theory. It's a fact. Since 1965 to roughly our own time, white America, I think, has made one of the greatest moral evolutions in all of human history. There is no example that I'm aware of a society determining to correct itself morally that's been more consistent and more relentless than what white Americans have done. Today, racism is despicable. It is seen as disgraceful by whites. They want no part of it. There are certainly fringes out there, but again, those fringes have no authority, no real role in American life. And whites have done this, and whites need to accept this as fact and accept this as reality, because it is reality. In my own life, I have met 99.9% of the whites I've met have had only goodwill toward me, have helped me, have mentored me in many ways. And I have not run up against. I have certainly run up against racism. I write about it in the book. But racism has not stopped my life. I don't think it stops the lives of many people. And I think white people ought to accept and be proud of this moral advancement and put that in the calculation when you think about public policy, when you think about issues that come up, that we are, in fact, a good people. America is full of good people who mean well, not people who are rotten and evil and waiting to around every corner to stump the lives of minorities. That just is not the reality of American life, and I think we whites can get out of this game of having to dissociate and fight off stigma as they begin to accept this fact, this achievement. Thank you. Let me stop there.
So glad you tuned into my channel, friend. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you're not already, please subscribe to my channel by clicking the logo here in the top right-hand corner and hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload new videos. Alright, that's it for now. Peace in the highest vibration. Havad, Havad, Havad. Yeah.